PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
I'm talking with Booker T, WWE Hall of Famer. Back in the day, many, many years ago, one of the top 5 workers in the world.
All time.
You remember when you pulled that rib way back in the day in WCW? And the whole locker room got all stirred up about it.
Especially Regal. Regal hated me, man, for doing that. Man, he wanted to fight me all the time for, doing that stupid deal. But, hey, man, you know what, though? I believed it. I believed it back then, man. I had to make myself believe it, man, in that locker room. It was a lot of top flight talent, man. Like yourself, like Jericho and, so Eddie, so many others, man. And if I didn't do that, but more importantly though, Steve, I went out and backed it up a lot of times too, man. I went out and worked my ass off to be, who I became.
We were talking the other day on the telephone, and, man, I've been wanting to do a podcast with you for years, but I always wanted to do it in person to talk about your career and everything like that. And I've told so many stories over the past, during podcasts. I was talking to Dallas Page and the story when you was trying to knock me out. And, but we never ever got to sit down in person to do a podcast. And I called you the other day and I said, oh, man, we just got to do one over Skype. And we started talking about MMA. And I didn't really know that you were a huge MMA fan. When did you first start watching?
I've been a fan since day one, man, since Horace Gracie. But the thing, though, when you called me, I caught you off guard. You know what I'm saying? This Booker T. This Booker T. I'm like, yeah, no, man, but I go back to the Horace Gracie days, man. The Shamrock, the ultimate warriors, man, the gladiators of the sport, man. Those guys, I've been intrigued a long time about it. I'm an advocate for those fighters too, because those guys, they work their butts off, man, and the money they get paid. I'm pushing for more money for those guys, man, because they are true warriors, and at the end of the day, man, they need to be taken care of.
Hey, man, when you was coming up in the business of pro wrestling, I'm sure you've had a lot of guys ask you, just because of your physicality, your look, you always spend a lot of time in the gym, but people always ask me, they say, hey, man, you love MMA. How do you think you would have fared if you got in it? If you would have got in it, how do you think you would have fared?
I honestly don't know, man, because we're going to be talking about, Ultimate UFC later on. But, in that game, it's about levels. You could be great, on the, elementary school, schoolyard, and then you get to high school and them guys beat you up. You know what I mean? You get that, and then those guys in high school, they thought they were tough, and then they go to college, and then those guys get beat up. And then those guys in college, they go to the pros, and they go, wow, I thought it looked slower than it actually really is. So fighting is levels, man, and it's something that you got to embrace. Most of the time, from when you're a little kid or from when you're at a young age. Let's just say that.
Well, hey, man, when you first started in the business, you were trained by Scott Casey and who else?
I went to Ivan Putski school, but Scott Casey, he was the guy who put the blueprint in my head as far as what wrestling was all about, as far as storytelling, as far as Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, going out and, creating and making the fans, feel a certain way opposed to just watching it, but so Scott Casey, he would put the blueprint.
Hey, man, and the thing about it was he was going through Dallas at the time, and I know you broke in '89, correct?
Yep.
And I broke in the back.
Actually 90. Everybody always want to put me in 89 and make me a little older. Even on social media, they say I'm 55. I'm 53. Let's get the record straight right here. Stone Cold Steve Austin with Booker T. I'm 53 years old, but look at this right here. Check this out right here at 53. Bam! You know what I mean? And I'm still looking good. So, but now I broke in 1990, man, and I got my break in 92 in WCW.
But what was the deal with Scott Casey training you? Because he was actually going to train me for a period of time. I was going to work at Watkins Motor Lines when I was working on a freight dock. And then, I happened upon Scott Casey, and we started talking. I wanted to get into the business, but then I guess he went off to Houston. And so all of a sudden, Scott Casey was no longer going to train me because I didn't know where he went. So that's when I hooked up with Gentleman Chris Adams, because I saw his wrestling school commercial on TV. And I went down there, and it all worked out for me because, he put me in a high-profile angle because he was trying to push his school. After 5 months in the business, I went down to Tennessee, worked for a little bit, and Jerry Jarrett sent me back, and that's when I turned heel and started working with Chris. And the only reason I was able to win Rookie of the Year in '90 was because I was in a high-profile angle with Gentleman Chris Adams. And my training back in the day, dude, we did the basic shit. We learned how to do some tumbling drills. We learned how to take bumps. And we did that over and over again. And there was 25 or 30 of us in a class. We had one ring, and we worked out 1 day a week. And that was after the television taping. So, Chris didn't even smarten me up after 5 months before my first match, going into the Dallas Sportatorium to work with the world-famous Frogman LeBlanc. And right then, right before motherfucking television taping, that's when I found out the business is a work. Now, I knew something was up, but he wasn't going to smart me up for nothing. Dude, right before I went out there, we laid out a little bullshit match, and referee Tony Falk, who's good as gold, was trying to call me spots out there, and we stunk out the joint, as we always do when we was green. But my question to you
don't know that.
Oh, yeah. But what did your training consist of with Scott Casey and Ivan Putski? Because Putski was more of a showman. He was a strong man.
I can tell you, as far as, let me tell you what happened to Scott first. When he left and went to Texas, Ivan Putski opened a wrestling school, man. And it was like one of the most high-profile wrestling schools you would ever, want to walk into at that time. Man, I mean, it was plush. It was in the southwest side of town. We had, one wrestling ring on one side. On the other side, we had full wrestling mats. We had televisions and video cameras, watching us and stuff like that. Ivan Putski had slipped on a banana peel, man, and got some sponsors, man, and they were all behind this thing. And he hired Scott, man, and paid Scott some good money to come up and help him, get the training done. And that's how I got hooked up with Scott. Scott, as far as what consisted of our training, I got lucky. Ivan Putski, he was a gimmick guy. He really wasn't a wrestler. He never went out and actually had a wrestling match, I don't think, in his whole career. He's been in a lot of, matches, but, as far as the wrestling go, that's another story. So we didn't do a lot of burpees, a lot of, Hindu squats and stuff like that. But we did learn psychology from Scott Casey. And Scott Casey taught me, like I say, the small little bitty things such as taking a headbutt in the turnbuckle, how to sell, a tackle properly, how to, create some space and little bitty stuff like that, so the school only lasted about 6 months, and it was closed down. Because of all the money that he was spending, bringing talent in, stuff like that. But I got lucky. I was in on the first crop.
How long did it take you to really understand the art of selling? Because when I got in the business, man, at first, for those first 2 months, PY, Chew High, all of the big, bad, tough-ass heels were coming down into Dallas. And for the first 2 months, dude, I got my ass whipped with kendo sticks, weightlifting belts. I was this white meat baby face with long blonde hair because I just got finished playing football at North Texas State University. So they knew that I was a student of Chris Adams, so I wasn't having matches. I was just a whipping boy. And they was going out there and beating the flying puff out of me. And then finally I started getting in the ring and, you can go back and watch one of my matches with The Undertaker. And I guess he was working as a Punisher back in the day. And I wasn't worth the flying puff. And because I came out of a football background, I kind of considered myself, not a tough guy as far as walking around and fighting people on the streets, but I was a pretty big motherfucker. So I'm thinking, all of a sudden, when I'm out there working with superstar Bill Dundee, who was one of my favorites and taught me a shitload about the business and psychology and really took care of me. Holy shit, man. Bill was 5'7", about 200 pounds. And Bill never worked like a small guy. And, all of a sudden, I'm thinking, man, I got to sell for this guy. And it was my conversation with Tojo Yamamoto. Did you ever know Tojo?
No, I never met Dojo.
Well, man, one time, he's telling me, he's trying to smarten me up about selling, so I could get some sympathy. Because, dude, if you and me are working, as we have many times, if I'm doing something to you, man, you ain't selling it, and you're doing something to me and I ain't selling it, nothing means shit because nothing hurts. So Tojo said, grab my ear. And I grabbed his earlobe. And, man, he cringed, Booger, like I just ripped his ear off. And he looks at me and he goes, that's sell. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head. How long did it take you to put the nuances and the art and the performance all into it? Because I know you was always a good athlete.
I took to wrestling really, really quick, man. For some reason, it seemed like it was something I was meant to do. It was like deja vu. But selling, for me, I talk to my students about it all the time, it's acting and reacting. That's pretty much all it is, And I got into a lot of fights when I was a kid, man. I used to kick a lot of ass, man, and beat up a lot of guys around the neighborhood. But I remember this one kid down the street, man, and he called me out to a fight. And, the fight was actually in my yard. And I remember what that ass kicking feel like, man, because that guy beat me up so bad, man. He beat me up so bad. But then, on top of that, I got a chance to, sit under the learning tree, guys like Manny Fernandez, guys like, John Mantell, guys like Black Bart, John Tatum, Maniac Mike Davis, those names, man, those guys were stars, man, in Dallas, and they were true bona fide wrestlers. When I see Stone Cold Steve Austin, I see gorgeous Gary Young running around, in my head every single time, because those guys, they were truly, truly great, athletes and great stars and entertainers down there in Dallas. And I learned so much, man, riding, and actually driving, and Black Bart sitting in the back seat, telling me which way to go, man. So that's how I learned, dog.
Dude, I remember sitting around some of the hotel rooms because I was traveling for a brief period of time with Black Bart and a little bit of Nikita Koloff. And Black Bart, he'd always had his glasses, and he'd push his glasses up and he'd be spitting in his little spit cup and dropping knowledge. And, to your point, man, I was riding up and down the road with Skandar Akbar and Bronco Lubitsch. I mean, I had no ride. I didn't have no friends. I wasn't over, so I was riding with them. They took me under their wings, and then I hooked up with gorgeous Gary Young, and we was riding down the road in his 280ZX, and I'm asking him questions the whole time. Billy Joe Travis, Jimmy Jack Funk, Maniac Matt Bourne. A lot of those guys, I mean, those are ace workers. Never got really big runs, but outstanding teachers and outstanding workers in their own right.
Hall of Fame talent right there you just named. I mean, on both sides, all those guys, Hall of Fame talent, man. And that's what, we talk about, the young guys now that's out there doing their thing. Those guys, it's a lot of great talent, on the roster today. These young guys, they can do things, unimaginable to guys like us when we were doing it. But they didn't get a chance to actually learn, what it was like to, peek through the curtain and watch the crowd reactions when certain guys are out there, taking it to another level, and then take that knowledge yourself and put it in your playbook and in your black bag and say, man, I'm going to use this somewhere down the line. They didn't get a chance to get that worldly experience, and I think that's the difference between us and them as far as, going out and performing.
I thought that the guys like you and me, you had a few more moves than me, a little bit more athletic than me, but we didn't do anything crazy. I mean, the athleticism that's going on in the squared circle these days is off the charts. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can go back and you had your Dynamite Kids and stuff like that. But they were kind of rare individuals. The way the business has sped up now, and I'm a big fan of the business, and especially when the guys are having good matches and telling great stories, and the same with the women. But what do you think about just stylistically how the business has transitioned into as athletic as it is now? Because it was not this way by and large, except for a few rare exceptions with regards to style in the ring.
Well, I can sum it up. It's really, really simple. I like you say, I love what these guys are doing right now. These guys are unbelievable athletes. But the chant nowadays is, this is awesome. This is awesome. And I love that chant. You know what I mean? That's a chant that I want the whole arena, saying, by the end of the night. But I want them to be saying it at the end of the night, not in my match, because I need them, like when I was wrestling Stone Cold Steve Austin and I'm a heel, I need those fans chanting Stone Cold, and then I need to get me going. Not this is awesome for me just to go out and jump on something and break something. I need an investment. I need an emotional connection. And that's the difference between what we did and what the young guys do now. And some of them do it as of late. I can honestly say, Seth Rollins, man, I mean, this guy, he has been doing some his storytelling, man. I mean, it's like writing a great romance novel. That's how good Seth Rollins has gotten as of the last, 6 months to a year. And I hope all of those guys, can fall into that same mode, because he's thinking about his body now because he's getting a little bit older. And I think that's one of the things. These guys are young and they don't realize until they get a little bit older.
But as far as the showmanship goes, and because you can be a great worker, because we've all known great workers who never got to the highest level that they should have gotten it. And I bring a classic point right now, Brad Armstrong. Brad Armstrong was one of the best workers, if not the best worker in the locker room, and he was universally respected. He could work American style, Japanese style, lucha style. It didn't matter. Brad could work his ass off. And as good as he was, he never got to that next level. And if he could turn it on, like, when that red light on that camera was on, like he couldn't in the locker room, man, he'd have been the biggest star in the territory. But my point in telling you that story was, you were a great athlete, and I guess you were born with a charisma, but also your showmanship. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you told me a story one time about you being a huge Bruce Lee fan. And,
man.
And like Bruce Lee was instrumental because, dude, some of the stuff that you would do, the after effect was exactly what, like a Bruce Lee, if you just think, okay, he goes over and chops a bunch of stuff up and that he's just going through the motions and it's cool. You can respect the ability. But dude, when he stomped a motherfucker and all of a sudden he's doing that face and he's making all those sounds. Tell me and tell everybody about how big of an influence Bruce Lee was on you.
I tell people all the time, man, you're never going to watch a karate movie without hearing somebody yell. There's always going to be some of that. If that's not in the movie, it's not a great karate movie. I don't care if it's a Chuck Norris, karate movie. I was just watching, the 5 Fingers of Death and the 5 Deadly Venoms just last night. And the thing is, I've watched these movies 100 times, maybe 1,000 times a piece. But the thing is, that's where I got my entertainment from. The boss, every karate boss, he was badass. You couldn't just walk up on him. You thought you could. You wondered how he became the boss. It was because he could kick everybody's ass. So those stories, man. My scissor kick, coming from the best of the best, the movie with Eric Roberts, back in the day, stuff like that, man. I was, drawn in. My sidekick, I always wanted to fly like a ninja. Ninjas could fly, you know what I mean? And that sidekick, I would tell my brother, hold him up as high as you can, you know what I mean? And I'm going to go up there and get him, you know what I mean? And I would do it, effortless, sometime. And that's what wrestling is, man. It's the embodiment of going out and making the fans feel like, man, when you put that suit on, you are truly like Superman, man. When you went out there and stomped a mud hole in a man and walked it dry, you actually believed it and some of those boots were pretty stiff.
Hey man, before we segue into a little bit of UFC 228, you got to tell a story about the time, because I've told it on the podcast before. I want to hear your take on it, because it was you and me in the ring together, and we always enjoyed working together. We knew each other since when you came into WCW. Hell, I guess I was there first. And then you guys came in, you and Stevie Ray. But we enjoyed working with each other. But one time we was working, it was WWE or WWF back in the day. Yeah, man, we had just started working.
Yep.
And, man, you knocked the dog shit out of me. And I was always real patient with sending receipts because, I was just like, okay, dude's off. And I like to work snug anyway. But, man, you hit me so damn hard. I said, no, man. I said, I got to send back a receipt now. So what happened that night? You tell a story. I've told it too many times.
The way I remember that story is we got one more we got to talk about too. As far as when I first got in the WWF, we got to talk about that story. But what I remember about the night that I whacked you, I'm known to be snug. I'm known to be a little I wouldn't say stiff or anything, but I'm one of those. I'm old school. If you hit a guy in the lip and you bust his lip, that's just part of the business. But normally that's in the exchange. That's normally when you guys are going at it, not when things just get started. But I don't know, maybe I was wound up, but I do remember hitting you and blood came out of your lip, and I go, oh shit. I ain't mean to do that. That's what I'm saying in my mind, But in my mind as well, I'm knowing that I'm going to get a receipt back, somewhere in this match. And the thing is, what I remember that night, you was really, really passive as far as getting that receipt back. But the receipt I remember getting back was a stomp right to the face when I was laying down on the ground. And it was a stiff shot right to the nose. And the thing is, I felt like I deserved that. You know what I mean? It didn't bust me up or anything, but it was a stiff shot, and it was open, and it was purposely done. Now, in business, a man could only respect that. You know what I mean? That's the way I remember that going. And now, should I have been, in the back, waiting on you behind the curtain before that stiff shot? No, because I delivered the stiff shot first, and the receipt was there given. So I understand that. I totally understand that. But young guys need to understand that when you're out there performing, that this is not a day in the park, man. It's about, especially when you're on TV. You got to go out there and lay those shots in. You got to go out there and whack that guy. Sometimes it do get a little, testy. And guys want to, get a little rowdy with each other. And I always said, hey, that's good for TV. Go out there and let all of that hang out. If I need to bring you back, I'll bring you back. And I think that's something you and I both brought to the table.
It's funny because the business of pro wrestling is such a work. A lot of people you were there. I think you were there when Sean, maybe it's before you came in, when Sean and Brett were kind of working an angle, and there was a lot of heat between those guys. And I think they was fixing to do that 60-minute Broadway or whatever it was, Iron Man match. But all of a sudden people think, oh, man, these two guys are mad at each other. It's going to be a hell of a match. Dude, when two people are really mad at each other and they shoot heat, normally the match ain't that good because both guys don't want to really cooperate with each other. It's got to be a total work in there, and sometimes things can go bad. Sometimes you can get a shot or a receipt or stuff like that, but, man, you got to maintain your composure because, like you said, it is what it is. It's very physical. It ain't ballet. You're always trying to protect the business, even though the business is a known work. But when two guys in there and they're really mad at each other, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a great match.
Being really mad at each other is one thing, but do you agree with me or not? Every time I had to go out and perform at a very high level with a guy, no matter whether he was my best friend or not, when I walked out of that curtain, I really wanted to whoop his ass. From an entertaining perspective. But I really wanted to go out and whoop his ass. And the camera needed to see that in order to be able to understand what was getting ready to happen. I don't know. A lot of times I could see when guys getting ready to go out and have a match, when getting ready to go out and perform and play wrestler. And for me, coming out of the curtain, that moment in time was frozen because I really believed in what I was getting ready to go out there and do.
Dude, I agree with you 100%. When I was out there, it didn't matter whether it was promo, whether it was a match, this was the interesting thing, and I don't know how long it took for you to really find yourself as a character and a character that you totally believed in. It took me a while because I remember, in USWA and even in World Championship Wrestling in Atlanta, I was Steve Austin. I was Stunning Steve Austin, but I didn't really know what that meant. All of a sudden, when I kind of started getting up, I come up with that Stone Cold idea, and I turned into Stone Cold, and I started growing into that character, and I was the BMF, and I believed that I could beat anybody's ass. I believed it was 120% shoot. Now, I was working, but I believed it, and that to me is, for me, because I remember one time we was riding down the road. Primetime Brian Lee was in the back. I was driving. Tom Pritchard was riding shotgun, and he said, Steve, he goes, what's so stunning about Stunning Steve? And I didn't have an answer for him. And he said, prime time. He goes, what's so prime time about Brian Lee? He didn't have an answer. But as Stone Cold, I had that answer. And the comfort to perform within that character, I was way better in that ring when I was Stone Cold than trying to be something else, because my mindset, my belief system was so, that's all that existed. It was a total shoot for me. How long did it take you to come up with that same type of presentation or mindset?
Hey, man, I'm going to tell you, man, those karate movies that I watched from when I was a kid, man, I always had that one mindset because of the boss. You know, in all of those karate movies, you know, that I watched, the boss was, you know, he was badass, you know, and every time someone tested the boss, he showed how real he had to be with those guys. You know, all those, you know, Shaft movies I watched, you know what I mean? Richard Roundtree was badass, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? He didn't take no shit off nobody, and I wanted to be like Shaft, you know, I mean, that's where Can You Dig It Sucker came from, you know, me watching those movies. And just for me, I always knew my role. When I remember, Big Van Vader, God rest his soul, you know, my first, pay-per-view in WCW, you know, my first pay-per-view, I'm in the main event, and Big Van Vader, he asked me, hey man, you think you really ready for this? You know, and he was shooting. He was really shooting because I was green. And I go, hell yeah, I'm ready for this, man. I've been training for this. This is a moment that I've been relishing for a long time. But I knew what my job was that night, was to go out there and bump for all of those old guys, make them look good, make them shine like new money. And then when I get in the back, they're gonna say, kid, you did a good job. You know what I mean? So I was trained to know what the test was in order to go out there and pass the test, even, you know, when I first got into WCW.
Well, from watching the movies that you watched, and we're going to get to some MMA in just a second, but watching the movies that you were watching, working with Scott Casey and Ivan Putski, who was a showman, like, who stressed to you that you need to be strong as a character, not just to work or going through the motions, that character, because I believe that going through the motions is one thing, but when you have that all-encompassing character that people can buy into, when you combine all those things, I think that's when you draw money and you sell tickets.
You know, Steve, I think that's the reason why I'm still here today. I think that's why I'm still, you know, relevant, you know, because, you know, I think as yourself, you know, it's never really been about me along this journey. I mean, of course, you know, I've been reaping the benefits of it, but it's always been about getting the script. You know, I mean, how many characters have you been? You know, and every time you got the script, you went out there and tried to make it the best you possibly could. You know, and when Stone Cold Steve Austin came, that's the one that stuck, of course. But all the time getting to that point, you made it the best you possibly could along the way. So for me, getting the role, man, and taking that role and enhancing that role and making it, you know, what I wanted it to be, no matter what it was. It was G.I. Bro. You know, I mean, I was G.I. Bro back in the day. And Dallas Page, he told a story, you know, I was listening to him, and he goes, you know, he came by and he saw me in the mirror, and he goes, man, what are you doing? I'm like, I used to work for a living, man. You know what I mean? I used to have nothing. And now I'm doing something, I'm having fun. So my brother told me, my brother Stevie, he said, man, I'm going to help you get a job. He said, the only thing I'm asking you to do, man, is, you know, don't make me look bad, man. He said, man, just do the job to the best of your ability. I don't care if it's sweeping floors. I don't care if it's washing windows. He said, man, just do the job to the best of your ability to what next comes along. And he said, you can do that, man. I'm going to help you. That's what he told me when I came home from prison. And I believe in that to this day, man. Every script that I've gotten, I just went out and did the job. Becoming the world champion, that's not something that I went home and dreamed about or anything. I just wanted to go out and be the best guy on the card each and every night, whether I was or not, whether I was top 5, in the business or not, you know what I mean? I was going to try to make it, look that way. I was going to try to feel that way each and every time I went out and performed, no matter what the role was, man. Every time they gave me something, Booker T and Gold Dust, I wanted to go out there and make it the best that it was and entertain the fans to the utmost that I possibly could.
Hey, man, shifting gears a little bit to the UFC talk, we were going to talk about 228 and maybe the preliminary matches, if you saw those as well. But the UFC started in, give or take, right around 1993. And I remember when it first came out because, way back in the day, you and me are the exact same age. Man, you see tough man contests on TV, and it was usually a couple of drunk guys with beer bellies, and they'd come out just swinging like this, and in 40 seconds, both of them was gassed, just totally blown up, and it was a shits. But that was what was going on back in the day. Then all of a sudden, UFC comes along, and it's all these different styles. And if a striker could be put up with just a plain wrestler, and it was a lot of things are so one-sided or lopsided and just puffed up. It was like, I don't know. It was weird. And then all of these changes. When did you start watching? And what do you think about dude, the stuff we saw in 228, there were some awesome matches, especially on the prelim card.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about the evolution of MMA, specifically UFC?
Definitely the Godfather, Horace Gracie, he put, mixed martial arts as far as, the sport on the map, as far as I'm concerned, as far as small guy. If you go back and watch watch Horace Gracie, the evolution of, him taking the sport, global, because a guy so small, going out, tapping guys out, some of the guys that, Gracie tapped out were heavyweights. Some of the guys, Gracie tapped out were super heavyweights. A lot of people don't even remember that. People like, Dan the Beast Severn, guys like Chemo, and his, theatrics, his pageantry, coming to the ring, back in the day, Tito Ortiz, of course, and his American flag, and his flames, coming to the ring, of course, Chuck Liddell, who's, now, talking about, him and Tito talking about getting back in the ring and doing it one more time with Golden Boy, so to watch the evolution of the sport from there to now, it's been awesome. We've seen a lot of great guys come through the sport. We've seen more importantly, we've seen, and we've been only watching it for, last 20 years. But we've seen so many guys' careers start and so many careers finish in the UFC as well.
Hello, and welcome to Pluto Phone. If you know the name of the movie you'd like to see, just stream it for free on Pluto TV, where all your blockbuster favorites are landing all summer long. Catch Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
Fantastic.
The Matrix Trilogy.
Welcome to the real world.
Mean Girls.
Shut up.
Titanic.
I'm the king of the world.
And so much more. For showtimes, press nothing. They're free 24/7.
That is so fetch.
On Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.
Man, as I was watching this card, there was a couple of names on here that I had never heard of before. What do you think about the star-making business of the UFC or MMA? Because you're talking about a shoot sport, but in wrestling, you're trying to build characters that are going to draw money. In the fight game, just because you're a great fighter doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a big draw at the box office. What are your thoughts on the star-making process as far as, a shoot sport like MMA? What does it take to sell tickets?
One thing about MMA, they're going to continue to sell tickets. People continue to come and watch, fight. People are just intrigued, especially women. Women love to watch guys go out and just beat each other up. For some reason, it's a sexual thing. I don't know what it is, but they love it. So the fight game is going to be around for a long time. But the sport definitely have to evolve as far as trying to take care of the fighter. I look at a guy like Deontay Wilder, who, the boxer, the heavyweight champion of the world. This guy, he's been heavyweight champion for quite some time, and he's made a lot of money. So when he retires, he's going to be
hopefully, if he, manages money properly, he's going to be okay. With these UFC fighters, one thing I do not agree with, like you say, the star power will never happen when you have, the champion, have to fight the number one contender every time they go out and fight. Now, I just don't believe in that. Me as the champion, I need a promoter like Mickey, with Rocky Balboa. You remember when Mick told Rocky, those guys was has-beens, you know what I mean? But, they just wasn't killers like this guy, you know what I mean? This guy will eat you alive, Rock, you know what I mean? Talking about Mr. T, you know what I mean? So I need a guy like Mick, covering for me, so I can have a longer career and make more money and become more of a star. So when I leave this, I might could get in an Expendables 3 or 5 or 10 or something like that.
Hey man, did you get a chance to? Man, I'm not a Fight Pass guy, so I didn't see the matches. It was or the fights that was on Fight Pass, but I saw the prelims. And most time, man, I don't watch the preliminaries. I just watch, the pay-per-view, and that's it. And I just got finished driving home to L.A. from Nevada, and, man, I was tired. And I said, man, I got to watch all these fights because me and Book going to talk about them on the podcast. And so, man, I started watching the prelims, and I was almost kind of dozing off a little bit. And then all of a sudden I got wrapped up in the stories. I guess it was Charles Bird, I guess his hometown kid there in Dallas, fighting against Darren Stewart. And the Stewart, British guy, known as being heavy-handed, and all of a sudden, Charles Bird, man, kind of handling him a little bit in that first round, and all of a sudden, they go to round 2, and then Darren Stewart starts doing what he does best. Kapow! Did you enjoy that fight?
Oh, man,
that fight, to me, that fight set the tone, because that's, okay, I'm in for the prelims now.
That's the thing right there, you know what I mean? These guys don't have star power, so you don't know what you're going to see until you see it. You know what I mean? You don't know what kind of fighter you're going to see until you actually see him fight. And then you watch a young guy like that who go out there and get a spectacular victory against a guy like that, and it looks great, But there again, Steve, that's what a level of fighters, that's what a level of fight game, comes into play. When he goes out and fights someone a little bit on a higher level, he's going to have a little bit of trouble. You know what I mean? Watching his defense, watching certain little holes in this game. I mean, I looked at Aljamain Sterling. You know what I mean? Aljamain Sterling, he went out there and he got a big win. But I still saw so many holes in this game, man. I saw so many little bitty things where, if he was fighting a better fighter, you know what I mean, he could have easily gotten beat. But, he pulled it off in spectacular fashion. I tell you, that guy's knee probably is going to be screwed up for the rest of his career. His career is probably over, and from certain aspects, just from that one fight right there, So, and the thing is, Aljamain Sterling, he's come a long way. He's a guy that they've been pushing to become a star, and he's still not that guy of, pretty much what I would say star quality, that got star power that's going to go out there and sell, a building or arena or anything like that.
But, dude, man, he was throwing bombs. I mean, his striking was impeccable. And all of a sudden, the finish was fantastic. You didn't see this in this event because, most of the fights, there was a lot of action. But it's funny because coming from the world we come from in pro wrestling, man, you try to get that crowd hooked. And then you're doing something through your storytelling, all the packages that have been run as far as your angle, and you're taking in people on a ride. And so you want them to come up and down with you and to get behind that baby face and to dislike the heel. What are your thoughts as far as just an MMA crowd where a lot of times you will have two world-class fighters out there, but because their styles are kind of canceling each other out, seemingly it's a quote-unquote boring fight when you're actually seeing a masterpiece of a chess game and they start booing and shit like that. What do you think about the MMA crowd? Why are they so fickle?
Well, the crowd is only, doing what they're supposed to do, when I think, when you got a referee, MMA is the only sport in the history of sports where the referee can actually tell the fighter, come on, guys, we need more action.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. We gotta get it. Come on, guys. Come on. Chop, chop. You know what I mean? It's amazing, when I see something like that happen, and the thing is, you do watch a guy go out there and he's technical, and that's the way he fights because he's a prize fighter. He's not a guy that just want to go out there and get knocked out. I don't agree with, these guys going out there just being looked at as cockfighters, thrown in the chicken coop and say, hey, just fight. That's not what, I think it should be about. I don't think that's what they should be. Of course, there's a lot of them, you look at Chris Lieben, Chris Lieben, he's a, former UFC octagon warrior, guy who's gone out there and, was willing to just walk in the shots, willing to just take them, and I can almost guarantee you now, if you go and talk to Chris Lieben, if he's conscious, if he's coherent, he would tell you he would not do that ever again. He would not walk into those shots that he took from Anderson Silva, thinking that this was a game, thinking that this was something that was funny when you could get brain damage. So I applaud those guys, at the top level that say, hey man, I'm not just going to go out there and just walk into anything just because the fans want me to go out there and do it. They did that to Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was the guy who got booed out of the building in many, many fights, but who's the guy at the end of the day on top, looking down?
Hey man, you just talked about Chris Lieben, and I was a big fan of his back in the day. And he had a lot of problems with some drugs and painkillers and stuff like that. I don't know his whole story, and he had a tough background, a very tough background. But when you start talking about stuff like that, as far as what it takes to be a top-level UFC fighter, even on their roster, the amount of toughness, the way those guys train every single day, and the fights they put themselves through, people always say, hey, man, what's tougher, pro wrestling or MMA? Because when you tell our schedule to some of those MMA guys who actually get what we do, they're like, man, what you guys do is crazy. I don't know if I could do that. So to me, it's a different level of toughness. Like the boys are like cockroaches. We're in a different town every single night. We're at a different gym. We're on the road. We're eating at different restaurants. Just as far as toughness or a hard way of life, which one do you figure is a tougher?
That's a tough question, man. That's a really tough question. What's tougher? MMA, professional wrestling. In professional wrestling, we definitely got to be physically tough. That's something that you can't be a professional wrestler without being tough. That just comes along with the territory, putting your body through something that's not meant for the human body to actually go through on a regular basis anyway. Sometimes, 275 days plus, doing it. That's just not something the human body, is supposed to do. Baseball, they play 80 games, 120 games a year, you know what I mean? They put these guys, but we put our bodies through a lot. But I think with professional wrestling, our mental, stress, comes into play more than anything, having to, fly to Germany, and, get off the plane and go straight to the arena and perform, and then go straight from the arena. Sometimes go back to the plane to get on the land, in another country, and go to the hotel for a couple hours, then go to the arena. You got a double shot that day. Stuff like that. The mental aspect comes into play. How far can you push yourself? How long can you stay focused? And for how many years? For me, it's been almost 28 now, so, that's the difference between what we do in MMA. Now, going out and getting kicked in the face with a shin, getting elbowed and sliced open, getting, my brains were getting choked out for a few seconds where there's no oxygen going to my brain, there's a toll. And there's something to be said about guys that, that's willing to put themselves through that, but as far as toughness goes, it's just a difference.
I think it is a difference too, but I also think, man, with the wrestling business or pro wrestling as you and I know it, man, I always tell people you're kind of living three lives in one body. On one hand, you are a professional athlete because of the prep you do and what you're doing in the ring at a high level. Then on top of that, you can be a rock star. And when you go places, a lot of people will have things that you might want, and they're going to want to hang out with you. So then you turn into the rock star aspect along with the professional athlete. And then on top of that, you're a truck driver because you're going to fly some places, but then you're going to get in the car and you're going to hump it down the road. So, it truly is that. And I was kind of known, way back in the day, I ran with the crowd that I ran with. But when I finally started making some money, I started traveling by myself. But I was always with the drinking crowd. And man, I mean, when I say I was with the drinking crowd, I mean, I was the drinking crowd, and I always had my whiskey, whether it's whiskey, beer, stuff like that. So to me, to be on time every time, work hurt, live that lifestyle, be the truck driver, I feel pretty good after I did it all. But if I could go back and do it again, I would have taken a lot better care of myself, and I would have slowed the partying down. And that being said, I don't think that a UFC fighter could live the lifestyle that I was living or Ric Flair was living, a whole different level, because he's the greatest in my opinion. But doing the same kind of outlandish things, it takes a hell of a goddamn toll on your body, brother.
Well, it does, you know what I mean? But you look at these UFC fighters too, that the lifespan of their careers are, at the top level is about 3 years, man. That's it. These guys burnt out after 3 years. I look at a lot of these UFC fighters now, man, and they look like old men. And they were, octagon warriors 10 years ago, and you see them now, you go, wow, Gabriel Gonzaga, what happened to him? Just because of, I can only imagine what those guys feel like in the morning, not just from the fight, not just the fighting portion of it, but the training, going in there and beating that dummy up all day, going in there running drills and whatnot, putting your body through stuff, I look at guys, like Ronnie Coleman right now, great, the greatest, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, if not the greatest, and the guy, he's in a wheelchair now because the way he pushed his body, going out there lifting, squatting, 800 pounds, repping, behind the neck press 500 pounds, stressing his body out so much, you know what I mean? So that stress and toll that these UFC fighters put on themselves to go out there and fight for that one night, it's a guy by the name of Roger Huerta. He was on the cover of ESPN magazine for the UFC back in the day. You probably don't even remember him now, but Roger Huerta, he's right now, he's still fighting, but his fight level and skills dropped off like that because there's no way that you can continue to push your body to go out and stay up to fight every single time, to fight the number one contender. Look at Tyron Woodley. They this is a guy, UFC welterweight champion, a guy who's done nothing but win in the UFC. But there again, he's a guy that's not willing to go out there and say, hey, I'm not going to just fight when you tell me to fight. I'm not going to just go out there and fight who you want me to fight. You know what I mean? Just because, you know what I mean? He pretty much, calls his own shots. They don't like that. That's one of the reasons why they threw this Englishman, Darren Till in there, this kid who, actually was not even a welterweight. They put Darren Till in there to say, let's get the strap off this guy. We got to get the title off of him. You know what I mean? But Tyron Woodley, he's consistent. He does nothing but one thing. He goes out there and performs each and every night. That's because he takes care of himself. He's not one of those guys.
Hey, man, while you was talking about the brutality of some of the shots these people are taking, man, Carla Esparza, former champion, she gets in there with Tatiana Suarez, who overcame thyroid cancer way back in the day. And, dude, just go ahead and expand upon what your thoughts on that fight.
Well, Namajunas should have been watching. You know what I mean? Rose should have been watching very, very close because the girl, she's big, she's long. She made Carla Esparza look like a little bitty girl in there. She just ragtagged her. She just beat her all over the place. They should have stopped that fight, just because it was a mismatch. Carla Esparza, she's good, but she's got beat up, a couple of times now, and it's just been about the level of fighter that she's going out there with. She's been getting overpowered just because she's 5 foot tall. She's a small girl, and she's relying on her quickness to go out there and be able to, fight a wrestler like Suarez. And Suarez, she did her job. And she did it in fantastic fashion. Just a straight up beat down.
But, man, I got to give a real big shout out to Carla Esparza. Because, man, you talk about a damn throttling. Tatiana Suarez was all over her, just kept taking her down, and all of a sudden there was one little hope spot when Carla gets up. And then all of a sudden, after that little hope spot, as we call it in pro wrestling, man, she backed down, and Suarez was just coming with that ground and pounding, those vicious elbows, man. Esparza's head was just, dude, she was knotted up. It was brutal.
Yeah, and people compare, MMA to boxing, which is the most dangerous sport, which one you take the most beating in, and you look at that, you look at Carlos Esparza's face, after a fight like that, and in boxing that fight would have been stopped because of the brutality of it. And MMA, the brutality, there is no stopping point until the guy is unconscious or dead, in certain cases, so it's definitely a brutal sport. And to see a woman like that, man, going out there, every time I see a woman get kicked to the ribs, man, all I think about is eggs cracking.
In the business of pro wrestling, Buck, Jesus Christ.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
This is the Steve Austin Show.
In the business of pro wrestling, man, I hear a lot of guys, getting concussions and stuff like that. And I don't really understand that because working the style that I worked, which was a very physical style, I know when I got dropped on my head, I was concussed. I was probably, I don't know, man. We know more about, or science knows more about concussions than we did way back in the day, but I don't know more about concussions. I can only speak to think that I only had a few of them. How many concussions do you think you suffered? Because other than a hard ass chair shot or something like that, I just don't understand. Well, like Mick Foley, I can understand why he had a lot of concussions, and I say that with respect because he's a great friend of both of ours. But dude, did you get a bunch of concussions in the business?
I think I may have gotten two.
Right.
And one was with Perry Saturn. He did a moonsault off the second rope backflip, and his knee caught me right on the chin, and boom, and I went down. He covered me 1-2 kick out. He grabbed a real chin lock, and he called a spot to me, he go, "You ready?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready," and my everything went to get up except my legs, and I laid back down there, and I go, "Wait a minute here, hold on a second, and then I got myself back together. I remember wrestling the Nasty Boys, and got hit in the head with a big jug of mustard, and it knocked me silly, you know what I mean? But other than that, man, I think it's the way that, we did go out there to make sure that we was, able to go and, perform the following night. We were, guys, we were great showmen. We were great entertainers. We went out there and we pushed it, to a certain level, but I teach here at my school, that, safety first. I got to make sure I take care of that guy that I'm working with. If I can't take care of that guy that I'm working with, it's going to be a problem. I'm never going to be able to work at the top level because the top level guy is not going to want to work with me. He's going to say, "Hey, man, this guy's, I got to make money." You know what I mean? So therefore, you got to be a guy that can go out there and work with everybody. Your finish that you do, you got to be able to go out there and do it with everyone. And I see guys now that, they don't care about the safety of the guy that they're working with. They just pick them up and just toss them, and how they land. And the thing is, the guy that's getting tossed, he don't care either. So it goes both ways. He just picked me up and shoot. So it's crazy. You know what I mean? So I do try to talk to the young guys and let them know that, hey, man, you can still old school. I don't want to try to cross our era with these young guys' era. It's their time.
Yep.
But I do try to tell them, hey, some of the stuff that we did, it still works today. All you got to do is just go out there and utilize it.
Hey, one of the things I forgot to talk about a fight. It was Jeff Neal working with Frank Camacho, and holy shit, man, Jeff Neal. I'd never heard of the guy. Dude, he was just his hands, his speed, his lateral quickness, his movement, his footwork was just premier. And Camacho was a tough ass guy. And at one time, man, he hulked up and told him to bring it. And he was getting his ass whooped. And then in the second round, and Jeff Neal almost finished him and got saved by the bell. And then
Jeff got that fight though.
Yeah, but he had a ton of heart. But dude, then coming in that second round, Jeff Neal come out of nowhere with that damn kick to the head. Dude, that was one of the worst knockouts I've ever seen.
No, and I tell you, man, he was on Dream Street. So I mean, he was out before he hit the floor. And that's the thing, Jeff Neal. That's another guy. He's tough. He's an awesome fighter. But that you just said it right there yourself, Steve. You know, with these UFC guys, you never heard of him. You don't know who he was, and so for my entertainment value, you know, I'm not going to be tuning in to, you know, watch Jeff Neal the next time, you know, the UFC come. I won't remember this guy, and that's the problem, you know, with you, and that's the spotlight. You know, I think the sport need on it more than anything. You know, you and I sitting here talking about just that right there alone is literally what these young guys. You know, I look at you. Let's talk about him right now. Sage Northcutt. Sage Northcutt. You know, he's a free agent now. You know, he's a young kid. You know that they were looking to put the rocket on. You know, send this kid straight to the moon. You know what I mean? The kid was going to be getting nothing but champagne wishes and caviar dream, you know, from this point on. But this young kid realized how hard it is in the UFC. They keep throwing this guy, you know, hard fights after hard fights after hard fights. You know what I mean? He's gotten beaten a couple of times out. If that was a kid of mine, you know, I mean, he'd have an undefeated record. If I was promoting him. If I was his promoter, if I was the UFC, you know what I mean? This kid, Sage Northcutt, he would have an undefeated record. He would have, action figures like, you know, Ken, the doll. You know what I mean? We would have, you know, video games and a calendar made up and all kind of. This kid would be making all kind of money. But Sage Northcutt chose to become a free agent, opposed to go back and take the money that the UFC is paying him right now. That's what's the problem with the UFC.
When you say he's a free agent, do you mean his contract with UFC is up because, you know, he redeemed that one loss? He had a hell of a damn outing, about a month or two ago, had a great fight. He was very aggressive. He's a good-looking kid, a body like a Greek god. I mean, you know, he's a poster boy of one of the fighters that you want to be able to highlight. He's not with the UFC right now?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a big mistake.
He's not with the UFC right now. Right now he's talking right now he's talking Bellator. Right now he's talking ONE FC. Right now he's talking about, you know, guys out there getting paid. He's actually said, and I quote, he's talked to a lot of his friends out there in other organizations that's making way more money than he's making right now. And when guys start talking like that openly, it means, hey man, when guys in there going through that kind of, this is my point right here, Steve. When guys going out there talking, about money, when they're going out there, you know, fighting at that level, it's a problem. When you hear guys at the end of the night say, I'm wishing and hoping I get that $50,000 bonus I could really use it. You know, how many top professional wrestlers like yourself and I have been worried about a $50,000 bonus?
Right.
How many?
Not too many.
Exactly my point. Because we professional wrestlers, we go out there and we work our butt off, you know, but we get paid very well, you know, for what we do. We go out and do a pay-per-view. We're not talking about, you know, how much money you work in the main event in WrestleMania. You ain't got to go talk about how much money you made. You're happy. You're a happy man, you know. And when these guys go out and they work in the main event and they still talk about they hoping they get a bonus tonight, that is a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I mean, it's always like, and I can understand the fight of the night and wanting that. I mean, that's incentive, but I mean, for us, it was like, man, if you want a pay-per-view, I mean, it was the same thing every single night in a house show, but more, especially more on a pay-per-view setting. You want to have the best match of the night. You want to steal the show. You know Vince ain't going to pay you no extra bonus. I mean, he could, depending on, sometimes, the sentimental factor would overweigh the number factor that they scientifically use to come up with payoffs. So, I mean, he could feasibly do that. But no, you weren't thinking, hey, I'm doing this for the bonus. I'm doing this because out of pride, I want to have the best match on the card. And when you have those big moments, when you set the table by having match after match after match, it's good, and your character's over, you're setting yourself up for bigger paydays down the road.
Bottom line, exactly what I'm saying. You know, seem like, you know, the reward would come there, you know, sooner or later, you know, but when you hear fighters, you know, like a George St. Pierre, not want to fight because of a money issue, there's a problem. You know what I mean? We never, guys that worked at the top level like us, we never thought about, if we were making good money or not. We know we were making good money. We knew, our royalty check on our action figures was gonna, be, really good just on that alone. But when I watch these guys go out there, and they fight their butt off, and they think about, want more money or need more money because they got to pay some bills. It's just a problem there. But these fighters, man, they deserve more. And I think we should advocate for them.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know the pay scale. I definitely know how.
I do.
You do? Okay, I know I know the pay scale for WWE. But here's the thing, dude. When you got in the business, you can learn how to be a great mechanic. You can learn how to have a character. You can learn your psychology. You put it all together. But along the ways, because it is a business, and you've ridden down the road, and I know you've said this just like I have, man, and everybody we know in the business has said this. Oh, man, I'm making this kind of money, but I just soon do it for free. That sounds good in theory, but at the end of the day, dude, we're businessmen. If you do not learn the pay structure, and if you don't try to elevate your salary or take the necessary steps to make more money, whether you're in a promotion for wrestling, UFC, or you're a gardener, a landscaper, or whatever, you're only going to get, what people want to pay you as less money as they can. That's just business. So it's incumbent upon everybody in the business, whether it's pro wrestling, MMA, or whatever, to learn the pay scale or learn your worth and always push. I mean, you heard all the stories about, God rest his soul, Warrior holding up Vince at the last minute for this, that, or whatever, or somebody else holding Vince up right before pay-per-view. Now, that's a bullshit tactic. But wouldn't you agree that you spent the time or took the time to learn the business aspect of the money? Because it ain't like you came from being a super rich family.
No, I mean, you got to know what you're worth. You know what I mean? You got to know if you're better than the guy that's standing next to you. You got to know exactly, if you selling tickets, putting asses in seats, at the same time. That part comes along with it. A lot of these UFC fighters, they don't have that power to say, hey man, I'm a draw, pay me this much money. Truly, I understand that point right there. But when certain guys are at that point and they still are talking about money, like just say for instance, a guy become champion and he calls out Dana White and say, Dana, when am I going to get, the big money? And it's the championship fight. He should be talking about money when it's a championship fight. That's the last thing the guy who wins should be talking about. But there again, I made sure I put myself in position to be one of those top guys. I put myself in position by going out there, working my ass off, creating the character, going out there and having showmanship, knowing how to make the crowd, feel a certain way at the same time. A lot of these UFC fighters, they don't have character. A lot of these guys are pure testosterone. They go out there and they do one thing, and fight. I tell young people all the time, in a UFC fight, these guys ain't thinking about going out there and hitting the guy with a body slam and then going up to the top of the cage and dropping an elbow. They're not thinking about that. They're going out there thinking about seek, destroy, and destruction. That's the only thing those guys think about. So totally I understand that, but in doing that, they're not building a character. In doing that, they're not building, a bigger following, but they are putting more wear and tear and pain on their bodies at the same time. You know what I mean? So therefore, with the WWE, they create characters. They create their stars. They're the one who's behind, pulling all the strings as far as what guys are going to be getting pushed to the top. You know what I mean? What guys are going to be getting, putting in certain angles, what guys are going to be headline and main event all these pay-per-views that's coming. I look at a guy like Chris Jericho, and this guy, man, he's one of the hardest working men. He's like James Brown. You know what I mean? He goes out and everything that he's done it on his own, man, at his own accord, man. He has created everything, as far as, Chris Jericho goes. And to be able to do that is, what a lot of these young guys, hopefully they can take some advice from a guy like that.
This has been a PodcastOne production. Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
Hello, and welcome to Pluto Phone. If you know the name of the movie you'd like to see, just stream it for free on Pluto TV, where all your blockbuster favorites are landing all summer long. Catch Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
Fantastic.
The Matrix Trilogy.
Welcome to the real world.
Mean Girls.
Shut up.
Titanic.
I'm the king of the world.
And so much more. For showtimes, press nothing. They're free 24/7.
That is so fetch.
On Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.